So, welcome to our first ever wealth webinar by Strictly Investments. Strictly Investments is an initiative that aims to educate and empower people from all walks of life about the world of investing. Our hope is that people that tap into this think tank will be edified and have a renewed perspective on their journey towards financial freedom. Now, I'd like to open up the session with this quote that, funny enough, I read on Twitter. It's by Robert Kiyosaki. Most of you should be familiar with him. Robert Kiyosaki is the person or the author that wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. In the book, he says that his rich dad once told him that rich is measured in dollars, wealth is measured in time. For example, most people think $1 million is rich, but if expenses are $100,000 a month, wealth is only 10 months. Wealth is how long you can survive without working. Being wealthy is more important than being rich.
Thanks, man. No. Bring the.
Yeah, so I thought that this, never mind Sid will there on the other side, but I thought this was a beautiful, beautiful quote that encapsulates everything that we've been studying this previous week. So if anybody wants to jump in just on that quote and how they've received it, feel welcome.
Yeah. I believe that quote was also on your status. I think that's where I read it, if I'm not mistaken. But
possibly.
Yeah, I personally really resonate with that because, there are a lot of instances where money can come in and, we can have an abundance of it, but it's really the money in how you actually utilize it. That's the real key to it. So if it's not a sustainable kind of money, then it's like you're living for today and then you'll die today kind of situation. So that quote, I really do resonate with it. Let me just
I think 100%. I think 100% because at the end of the day, like I think, particularly within our own community as Black people, like there's a very big misconception about what wealth and money is, wealth and riches are rather, and I think that has a lot to do with with how disenfranchised we've been historically. And as such, it becomes very difficult to conceptualize something you've never been accustomed to because when we just look at the game that we're playing, wealth was never really designed for us initially. We're playing catch up with this game of wealth. So we often find ourselves, because we don't know what, wealth looks like or what it fundamentally means, we often attach ourselves to what the symbols of wealth look like. So we'll buy like the expensive things that don't necessarily promote any sort of longevity financially for us. So, I think that quote it's so simple, but it's so vital for people to be able to understand that it's not a measure of how much you have, but rather how long can you survive,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And let's break that down, Miles. You said something quite interesting. You said that we don't know what wealth looks like, which leads me to my next question, because I was sitting, Miles, and I had the thought to myself, I said, we all know what rich looks like. If I were to say, picture someone who's rich, it's very easy to imagine that because, you can imagine, like you said, your symbols of wealth. You can imagine somebody who's rich, lives in a nice estate somewhere, drives a nice car, eats out every other weekend, can take care of himself, can afford nice clothes. It's easy to understand rich, has an expensive watch. But if somebody would just actually sit and ask me the question, what does wealth look like? That's when you start to see that there's a big gap in knowledge, because how would you even begin to answer that question? In fact, Emmanuel, I challenge you. If I were to ask you right now, what does wealth look like? How would you answer that question?
Well, from what I really do, like what I've seen and what I know, basically I'll look at wealth as a space where a person is truly free, or a space where a person is truly free towards themselves, where they are not dependent on any external factor for their own validation, for their income, for their health, for their well-being. That is what really, I believe, wealth boils down to. The freedom.
So what does it look like? I mean, you could be describing a hobo.
Yeah.
Homeless person.
Fair. And
what does it look like?
I believe it's a person that is confident
in I wasn't ready for that. Like an assistant.
Yeah. But I believe it's a person.
No, but
that's
I want us to
confident,
dive into the specifics because
Yeah,
my hope is to show us just how much we don't know about wealth. It's so
yeah,
hard
Yeah.
to imagine.
100,
So
100,
Emmanuel,
100.
continue.
Yeah. So like even like that's a great example with the hobo. I could say that that hobo is wealthy if that is what he wants to become. And whatever hobo sphere that he's in, maybe he has maybe let's say he doesn't have enough clothes, but he has enough food of where to get food and he lives free like that. I'll be like that man is truly wealthy because if I were to ask him right now, are you happy? Are you okay with your standard of living at this moment? And if he says yes, with the same mind, I believe that person is truly wealthy. So it's more of a state of mind to say, hey, he's free to whoever he wants to be in this life.
That might be a hard one to swallow, Emmanuel, and I'm sure a lot
Yeah.
of people
And
might disagree with you.
and
I want
you
to
know,
ask
Okay.
Miles. Miles,
yeah,
would you
yeah.
say that hobo, based on what Emmanuel has said, would you say that hobo is wealthy? And
You know, look, I think
if
yeah.
not, give us a different picture of what wealth looks like.
Okay, so it's not to say that I necessarily disagree with Emmanuel. It's more so that I'm just worried about being idealistic in the way that we look at it, because ultimately, look, while this person might also be, I guess, somewhat happy and comfortable with their position, we also then need to look at what other factors influence the idea of wealth. And I think one of the biggest ones is choice. You know, so
Mm,
if we were to look at this person who's now living on the street and they get sick, for example, they don't have choice of what kind of healthcare that they're going to get. And that in
mm,
itself is already a very big determining factor for wealth. You know, like they also say your health is your wealth. So if you're not in a position where you can be able to actively look after that or have choices in other spheres of your life, it's very difficult for me to want to say that he's wealthy. You can say that this person might have peace of mind, and might be
yeah,
wealthy in that emotional domain. But I think when we're looking at it just in terms of like the bigger scheme of choice and the ability to do things, you know, I'm not saying that he's not happy with his range of what he can do. That's not at all what I'm implying, but I'm saying his
yeah,
range is still very limited. You know, it's a completely different thing if he had all the range to do everything in the world, but still chose to live this life. That's a
Yeah,
completely different conversation.
yeah,
You
of
know what I
I
mean?
think
course.
a
All
very,
right.
I think a very important thing to mention right now would be Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Hmm.
because for a
Nice.
person, because for a person to be in that sort of position means that they've already satisfied a lot of their lower order needs.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
know what I
But
mean?
it's the higher
yeah,
needs that are missing, right? The
Hmm.
self-fulfillment,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
education,
but
Hmm.
the
maybe
reaching of your highest potential.
Hmm.
maybe for him, living in that sort of way is his form of fulfillment. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Facts.
You could
So
be.
what are you saying, Cyril? Would you consider that person wealthy?
I mean, let's look at J. Cole right now, man. You know, like you see that guy, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you check his
But let's not
aesthetic.
get it twisted. Yeah, he looks like that, but his bank account says something very different.
I was also
Yeah.
just about to say this is why I love black people. You can't have a debate without somebody just throwing in J. Cole or Kendrick Lamar
Yeah.
somewhere there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly,
You just have to
exactly,
throw them in.
exactly.
because they've
You know,
actually done the work, you know? They've
Yeah,
actually done
yeah.
the work.
yeah,
So,
Um,
I think it would be a different conversation if this homeless person had a level of choice to the extent that J. Cole has. I think Miles hit it right on the head. I've heard um, a lot of, I take a lot of advice from people who are way smarter than me, and they all seem to attest wealth to freedom, right?
Hmm.
Everybody says wealth is freedom, but I have a problem with this conversation because it's very ethereal. Wealth is freedom, wealth is choice, wealth is sustainable, wealth is time. We all hear these things. We hear these things all the time. They don't really mean anything to us. For the person listening, and they have no basis in financial literacy, they have no knowledge to stand on. I think we're missing the principles of first knowledge. So we need somebody to make it practical. Why is it
Mhm.
so hard to pin wealth down? I asked the question, what does wealth look like? Why is it so hard to say it consists of one, two, three? Why is it all these? If everybody has choice. Okay, let me ask you this. Not everybody has choice, but let's imagine somebody living in a village somewhere, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
In
Mhm.
his village, he owns he owns livestock and cows, and he owns livestock, cows, chickens, and he also
Yeah.
owns a big plot of land where he can plant food and sustain himself, right? He never has to worry about that. Let's assume, just for this conversation, that he has access to some sort of borehole or water to access to sustain his food over time, right? This person, where he lives, there's no roads, there's no robots, there's no traffic lights. It's gravel. It's in the village, but he has everything that he will ever need, and that's how he lives. Would anybody here, outside of the ethereal definitions of wealth, would anybody look at that person and say, "That's my life goal. I want to end up like that"? Because I know everybody on this, everybody in
What
this
does
right now,
ethereal mean?
but it's not grounded. It's like it's very philosophical. Right? We want to make it practical. Do you envy this person's life? If you're going to tell me that this person is wealthy, the person that I just described to you, do you envy their life? Do you say, if I was in their position, I'd be lucky? I don't know who wants to take that on.
This is exactly the point I was trying to make. On the one hand, it's not to say that I don't necessarily agree with the idea that, for example, Emmanuel's description of wealth. I feel like
Emmanuel started it very tough, eh? He made
he did. And we're working around it, and it's cool. But it's one of those things where I feel like that description of wealth, while it's not incorrect, I think it speaks more to the idea of having peace of mind than necessarily wealth, because wealth is an aspect of that, but it's not. It's not the only key component that then creates peace of mind. So I think that's the first thing that I would like to personally clarify, at least in my own perspective. Then when we look at it like in the more practical sense of what you're speaking about, I think that's, it becomes, I think what makes it very difficult is because wealth is also very defined according to what one subjectively looks at and thinks their life should look like financially. So then we need to be able to take wealth and contextualize it as to whether or not, are we going to be speaking about wealth of mind, wealth of emotions, wealth of everything, or are we just talking about financial wealth? Because if we're just talking about financial wealth, then no one here can cap and pretend like, no, that's the life that I'm aspiring to have. No one here can cap about that.
No, so let's get into that, Miles, because that's what we're all about here at Strictly Investments. I think a lot of people listen to podcasts every day, listen to advice from their favorite celebrities, and they get all this advice that they can't apply directly in their lives. Who here, if I were to ask the question, what does financial wealth look like? Who would answer in the affirmative?
You must answer. You can't keep on asking us these hard questions.
Keep on asking the questions. They're difficult questions, right?
You can start us off, but I have a few to say. But yes, you can start us off.
So the reason why this is a difficult question, I think there's something to be learned from the interaction we just had here, is because we don't, on an everyday basis, think about wealth. We don't. We've been taught not to think about it. We kind of have an idea of what it looks like, but there's almost some sort of bad feeling that comes to, okay, let's talk about it. We almost get uncomfortable. It's like we're even scared to make our suggestions because we haven't tested our theories against enough people for us to be confident to say this is what wealth looks like. We don't even know, which lets me know that we're not even playing the game, right? Exactly. But if you were to ask me, what does financial wealth look like? It is a tough one, but I can tell you some of the signals that point me, that indicate to me that financial wealth might exist here. One of the biggest symbols, one of the most fundamental symbols is real estate or land, right? Some sort of land, some sort of ownership of a territory where you can organize some sort of means of production, whether you want to set up a business there, whether you want to set up a farm there, whether you want to live there, but some space to do something, right? And the more space you have, in my experience, the more wealthier you are. So I've realized that when we think about real estate as Black people, we only think about residential real estate. We're thinking about, where are we going to live to stunt on these niggas? How are we going to show them that we've made it out?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why the conversation about wealth is very difficult. It can be difficult because it's a moving target, meaning what was wealthy 100 years ago is not wealthy now, and what's wealthy now will not be wealthy 100 years ago. I give you an example. Like, you can imagine about 500 years ago having a lot of livestock and cows, and those things were the medium of exchange back then. That was considered to be very wealthy, right? But today you look at those people's lives and you feel, nah, even with your broke life, You got Wi-Fi. You're sitting somewhere in the suburbs. You have a laptop. You have a cell phone. You know, you don't need the livestock because you can go down the road to the store and buy your food, and it's all packaged for you. So you see your life as a lot more convenient than that other the person I described prior. So I think wealth is created around innovation, right? If we're going to say that wealth is freedom, we need to understand that the more we innovate, so whoever came up with the cell phone made the entire world more wealthy, because now we can connect with each other all over the world. Whoever created the automobile made us all collectively as a race more wealthy, because now we can travel further than we ever did. And that's what wealthy people do when they have money, is they don't want to work, they want to travel, they want to learn, they want to explore themselves, right? So speaking more to these freedoms, whoever came up with an irrigation system and made sure that we can access water from the tap made us all collectively more wealthy, because now we don't have to spend a certain amount of time in our day walking long distances to go and fetch water, right? So wealth happens whenever there's some kind of innovation. Well, at least collective wealth. Now, personal wealth is how far ahead of these luxuries and comforts does the individual have over everyone else, right? That's personal wealth. We're not talking about collective wealth. And in that case, usually the person who's more personally wealthier than other people has the first aspect that I mentioned is land and real estate, right? We don't have land like this. This is a time for reflection for us Black folk. We don't got it like that. You know, white people have inherited land. They can easily convert their land into 80-unit flats and be set for life before they even begin the journey of their career. They're not playing the same game as you. You need to understand this. They have farms, they have hectares of land they've inherited for their forefathers. And that's a conversation we'll maybe unpack throughout the rest of this webinar. But just to keep it brief and short, another indicator, another indicator of wealth other than land would be, I guess, capital, right? That's the next indicator of wealth. How much of whatever the society uses as the medium of exchange, how much do you have over that to leverage things that you want, do you need? How much capital do you need if you were to start a business, which is the third indicator of a lot of wealth, is having a sustainable business that can last over a long time, because that's also an asset that generates income. So land, capital, and business, I think those are the best indicators of wealth that you can find, because all of that is sustainable. All of that is income producing. None of it is a Benz that cost you money. None of it is a Rolex. You know, that's the big difference between wealth and riches. Riches is, I guess, a big amount of money in the bank, and wealth is the systems that allow those riches to come into play.
It's crazy. You know, it's funny. Like when I listen to you speak, I think to myself, we couldn't afford land, so we settled for Land Rovers.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
What
I didn't know it was like that tonight.
He was in the studio before he came to the You checked it and he got that cap on there.
Yeah, you know what it is. I got the do-rag on and everything. I'm ready to speak these bars, bro.
So I mean, I love this. And just to keep it moving, I'm gonna keep asking more difficult questions as some self-reflection. The next question would be, now that we've kind of,
I'm thinking, like, for me, wealth, when I think about wealth, I look at it from a relative basis, you know, because I think for us to have one shared, you know, ideal, it's kind of tough considering we all have different upbringings. So for me, wealthy right now, considering my current situation, I'm just thinking about independence. You know, I'm thinking independence firstly, and then the ability to pursue my interests. You know, not to complicate it too much.
And you know, like I think why I want to add on to that, sorry, is because I think you mentioned some very important things, which was, you know, you're speaking about, for example, somebody who's wealthy will own things like land. But you also mentioned a very important thing about how wealth 100 years ago doesn't look like what it looks like today. You know, at this point in time, the wealthiest person might not even be the person who has the most real estate. It's the person who has the most Bitcoins. Now all of a sudden the game has changed. You know what I mean? The game has changed completely.
Yeah, that's an important point.
You know, so in as much as I'm not denying the importance of looking at it from conceptually from land, but the game has changed so much that really only provides like one small portion of the amount of ways that people are making money these days. You know, so I think that then builds on Sidwell's point about how it's very subjective as to what it is that you want it to look like. And that's why wealth is such a difficult topic to talk about. I think when you look at it fundamentally, if you were to compare crypto and, for example,
Land.
fundamentally, both of them are speaking about assets, income generating assets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Deflationary assets.
Yes. So if we were to then define that or to categorize that, instead of saying it's the ownership of land or crypto, it's rather the ownership of income generating assets.
Full stop.
You know,
right?
that would then be
Yeah.
So
That's a good one too. I'd like to. So earlier I said land, owning a business, and capital. The formal terms actually, these are called the factors of production, right? And it's actually land, labor, and capital, right? Labor represents business. Vusi Tembagwaya says, out of these three, you know, one of them is dying, the other one is dead, the other one is going to die. In these three factors of production. And that's because, you know, with land, we're in the era where everybody's preaching make money online, and it's not about having office space anymore or having a space to produce. You know, we have digital assets now. What we're doing here is an asset. It's going to go out and it could potentially build some sort of equity for the brand. And in terms of labor, you know, artificial intelligence is the
Turn this
move
into
now.
an NFT.
So speaking of NFT, so exactly now artificial intelligence is coming rapidly to replace the labor force. In fact, in the McDonald's here in PLK, there's no more tellers. There's like they already out. You come, it's a self-serving little stall there, and you order your food. And I think when it comes to capital, definitely the system of capital is transforming. I didn't think we're going to have a conversation about cryptocurrency tonight, because that is a monster.
It's a monster.
No, I don't think we're going to dive into it. Shame. I don't think we're going to dive into it today.
I wanted to ask everybody this question, right? Emmanuel, maybe you can jump in on here. I wanted to ask, now that we have some sort of working definition of wealth, right? If you looked at your life and your plans, honestly, would you say that you're working towards attaining wealth?
Okay, first and foremost,
that's such a personal question.
Like we're here for it, man.
We're here for it. Let's unpack it. So just to repeat your question, because the thing you popped up saying that it's 10 minutes left. But
all right.
Yeah, you said that if I had to look at my life and see if I am on that journey towards personal, like obtaining substantial personal wealth, would I categorize it as that? I would say
before you even start, you know, somebody doesn't know the answer when they repeat the question back to you. So like what you said was
not even like
you know they don't know the answer to the
I
question.
literally got distracted because this thing just popped up
because of the time.
Yeah,
no, we'll have a part two. We'll have a part two. Don't worry.
But Miles, I got that. Not even. I would say I'm half and half on it. So if I don't need to really go into that much of the specifics, but in terms of within this climate or within this context or my context of what wealth is and relative to one another, I would believe I am on that journey towards financial wealth because
how come? What makes you confident?
What makes me confident is the activities and the habits that I'm developing, not developing.
What are those activities and habits?
So when it's a hot seat.
Let's go, guys.
Let's go there. Some of the activities
don't want the nonsense no more.
Are treating people correctly. I don't think people even saw that. So one thing, the EQ with relating to other people, I believe that is one of the skills that I've really developed over the years. So when it comes to even the small businesses that I'm setting up over here and probably also with the family, I'll be able to people manage, which I believe will be a valuable asset in the future to generate that wealth. Another example is straight up investing. Investing the little income that I get peanuts, right? But even those peanuts, those crumbs of those peanuts, some will go into some shares.
What are you investing in?
I'm investing in Purple Group, Orion Minerals, Moderna vaccine.
Shares.
Actually, that marijuana that Sido talked about, you know, still have to have a conversation there, a little bit of those shares over there because, you know, these are kind of like the potential.
It doesn't help that I'm Nigerian and I also want to be there. It doesn't help that I'm foreign and I want to be there investing in marijuana. Like that's another stuff I'm just living up to. All that's missing is the accent.
Like, we knew it. We knew it.
So, these are some of the things. So it's these little habits that I'm slowly learning and picking, reading books, trying to wake up early and just show up for the day. I believe those are.
So you're lucky. You already own pieces of shares. You're participating in our economy. You know how that system works. Miles, would you say that you're personally building wealth? And by
100%.
wealth, I'm talking about the definition. I guess if I'm speaking about wealth, I'm talking about a level of wealth that everybody or most people would agree. Yeah, that nigga is wealthy. That
Yeah,
person over there
100%.
got it.
Because I feel like number one, I think the biggest thing that has definitely changed for me has been the way that I manage my money. So it's not necessarily that I'm still in varsity and everything. So I definitely don't have like an excessive amount of money that's just there. But if I were to look at my current situation, where I've gone from being that person who every time I go into a restaurant, I have to order a lemon latte, which is basically just water with lemon and ice because I can't afford to get a drink.
Oh, lemon latte.
You know life, dog. It's okay.
But you know what, Miles? Just the fact that you're in a restaurant lets me know that you could do better.
Wow.
Just the fact that you're in the restaurant.
No. Sometimes your friends ask you to go out and you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy who doesn't have it. So, I've gone from that point in my life to, I wouldn't say not necessarily looking at prices, but it's more so a thing of, if all my sources of income were to stop today, I can sustain the lifestyle I've had for at least a good year.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So
not a lot of people can say that.
Yeah, and I think, but that what contextually is very important to then also remember is my lifestyle is a student's lifestyle. So that also means I'm not paying for like bills, etc., etc. So if I were to look in my current context as to what my expenses are, what I need to spend money on, the lifestyle that I live, the places that I go to, and then the things I need to, like the maybe monthly debit orders for things like gym and stuff, I'm in a very good position. But I think what's also really lovely about my position and why I can then confidently say, yes, I am building towards wealth is because I'm actively capitalizing on the fact that I don't have any other expenses, so a lot of what
does that entail?
So I don't have to worry about, for example, mortgage expenses, car expenses. I don't have to worry about living expenses. You know what I mean?
And how are you capitalizing on it?
So money that would have been going, because I do have jobs, so money that I would have been using to then cater for those expenses just goes straight to investment. And then some of it will obviously go for, good times, a little drink here and there.
Exposed.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to have a personal chat about that.
So yeah, I would say so.
What was the question, man?
The question is, now that we have a working definition of wealth, would you say that you're personally creating a life of wealth for yourself? Would you say confidently that when I get to the end of it, I'm going to be wealthy AF?
Most def.
Why?
Because I just got a job, right?
And
I'm doing deliveries and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking to myself, like Miles said, I don't have any expenses like that, man, because I'm using my mom's car. So all I'm doing is just getting money. And then because I've been broke for a minute, I'm going to just let it chill. I'm going to just let that money chill. I'm going to let it get moldy. Like how the rappers say.
Get moldy.
Yeah, I'm going to let it get moldy. And then like after a while, I think, Masoro, you mentioned, you said credit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try get my credit score up, and then yeah, man. And
you're gonna leverage your way into wealth.
Into a few things, because right now, like, it wouldn't be wise for me to just once I get my first check, I go buy something.
Yeah.
Rather I just save that money up for a bit, and then when the time comes, make use of leverage, and then not go back to
what are you gonna leverage? What are you gonna leverage your money into? I'm waiting for the wealth part. I see the responsibility.
Into a portfolio, diversified portfolio of, certain securities. I was thinking like green energy. I was thinking electronic vehicles, some crypto. I was thinking market indices. I talk a lot with Michael. Michael couldn't join us today. I talk a lot with Michael about investing in the NASDAQ 100, because if you check the performance over the last, I think, year, it's up like 82%. And that's like that's an index.
For people who
So
don't know, the Nasdaq 100 is an index fund. An index fund is basically a specialized asset, I don't know, offering that groups a bunch of shares into one product, so you don't have to pay individual fees for buying all the different shares. So they basket it
yeah,
for you.
buying them yeah. And then the nice thing
Um,
about buying it with certain platforms is that you can do fractional purchases instead of having to put up like what 200K.
Yeah.
for it.
Mhm.
I see here we just have about 2 minutes left. So I just want to let everybody know. I heard everybody speak about investing in shares. All of you are actually quite a lucky bunch. I believe this panel is not fair because everybody's talking responsible stuff, taking their money, investing,
Yeah,
portfolios.
that's because
That's
that's
We
what
haven't
you
heard.
asked for. You
Yeah, we
asked for the
haven't.
responsible stuff,
True,
so that's what you got.
true. But you know what? Just
Reasonable.
with this minute left, I'd like to say
Yes.
that a lot of people don't have that advantage. We haven't really captured how people go wayward with their money and their beliefs. A lot of people don't have friends that can positively impact them like you group here. So you need to realize that you're something special. I just want to let everybody know that if you're looking to invest in shares, I think most of the people in this chat use a platform called Easy Equities. That's Easy Equities. You can find it on the Play Store. If you're using iPhone like Miles here, you're gonna need to go to the what is it? What is it? I don't even know. I forgot the. Is it the?
Just the App
What is
Store.
it?
Just
The App Store. All
Yeah,
right.
Play Store,
Yeah, that stuff.
iStore.
But we have less than a minute left. So remember, guys, if you want to invest in shares, research, look up. There's tons of videos online, Easy Equities, and I think that we will come back for part 2 to unpack this further.
Yes, same link, guys. So peace out.
So we